What's up, guys? Phillip here, and welcome to my podcast. We are now on episode 5. And if you are new to my page or new to my podcast, welcome. My name is Phillip Velayo. I'm a former scout sniper turned professional competitive shooter and long range creative. I love teaching people about the art of long range shooting, precision rifle shooting, but really also being able to utilize visuals to tell the story of precision long range shooting. In this podcast, I talk about all of my prep and behind the scenes of getting ready for the 2024 PRS Finale. And as you can tell, I'm actually in Boise, Idaho right now on check-in day, recording this podcast, and I've got about an hour and a half drive. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. But, this podcast is for anyone that's wanting to get into competition or maybe wondering what it takes to compete at a high level, and all the things that go behind the scenes, at least for me, of like getting ready for a match like this. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. That always helps. But more specifically, hopefully you guys get some good takeaways regardless of what your application to long-range shooting is. As you guys know, I'm very passionate about competitive rifle shooting or anything precision rifle shooting in general, but really the competitive shooting scene, because I think it just continues to push all shooters outside of their comfort zone, as well as just take our capability as a whole to a whole nother level. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the episode. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of my podcast. And I am in a completely different setting. As you can tell, I'm actually in Boise, Idaho right now. It is November 1st, check-in day for the 2024 Precision Rifle Series finale. And I know I missed last week. It's been super busy. I actually had a video client project out in California that just took a lot of my bandwidth, and was not able to get a podcast out with, catching up with family stuff and homework, and also getting ready for the PRS finale. And actually, I'm actually about to head out right now for check-in. It's about 8:00 in the morning, and I just wanted to knock out a real quick. This is going to be, pretty short, just because I've got about an hour and a half drive to Bliss, Idaho. I've been saying it wrong. I thought we were going to be going to Mountain Home, which Mountain Home is still pretty relatively close, but it's going to be in Bliss, Idaho, which I've never actually been to this specific venue before. So I'm excited. And I figured for this podcast, I'd talk about like what I've done to actually prepare for the PRS finale, because I'd be lying to myself if I told you that, I didn't do whatever it took to, do somewhat decent, unlike previous finales, or even, previous matches where I kind of just showed up after tuning a somewhat load. So once I got my invite to the finale, as you guys heard in the last podcast, really it was for me just making this deciding factor of like what cartridge that I wanted to shoot as my primary, and making sure that I got some practice time behind that, rather than before. What I would normally do is just find a load that works and roll with it. I also even broke my promise of like this year sticking to one cartridge and bullet, because that's one of the things that I knew was in my way the whole time with regard to preparing for a match is I would just figure out, hey, this is the match that I'm going to. Okay, I feel like a 647 with a, let's say a 110 would do well there. And instead of practicing with that, I would just, confirm my load, that this is what load and velocity that I wanted to use, and really just rely on obviously the ballistic solver information. And again, I would do okay, but the problem is like that now I'd go to that match and I'd be overcalling my wind, or I wouldn't just, give myself enough time to process information with regard to like feedback of like, where that bullet's actually hitting, especially on the closer stuff. So I just realized that like I wasn't giving myself enough time to actually learn that bullet when it came time to shoot it at an event. And so that's one thing that I wanted to do in preparation for the PRS finale was like, okay, hey, number one, I wanted to make sure that my load was dialed first and foremost, because I have in the past, at least this is my excuse. We all have excuses, right? But I know that I've been to a finale where my just rifle wasn't shooting the way that I wanted to on game day or on and with the amount of time commitment travel that an event like this takes and whatnot, just making sure all my T's were crossed and my I's were dotted. So yeah, so let's talk about kind of my game plan. So because I knew it was going to be somewhat windy in the Idaho area, I decided to use my primary or load for my primary rifle as the 6.5 Creedmoor. So I respun on my 6.5 Creedmoor from my 6.5 that I had for the gap grind. And I know I wanted to roll with 153 A-tips, very similar to what I shot earlier this year at the Hornady PRC. I thought it was a great combination. And so I was like, okay, I think this is going to do well for this event. And those 153s have been shooting really well for me. And I have the same lot of bullets that I had earlier, which was nice. So I respun my 6.5 Creedmoor on, and I essentially had Short Action Customs spin me up 2 more backup 6.5 Creedmoor barrels in the case that, I shot that one out, or I just didn't like the way that barrel, which is actually barrel number 2 for my Lone Peak actions. So once I got those extra barrels in, I'll say 6.5 barrel number 3, I spun that onto my backup rifle, which is an all black rifle. It's kind of like my tri-gun or like my practice rifle of like, being able to like dabble or at least have the same setup and practice positionally. So I have the Dragon Ball Z rifle, which I did a video about, all set up as, okay, hey, this is my primary rifle. My actual true backup is going to be my Bumblebee rifle, which is still in 6.5 47, just running 140 ELDMs. I've got a really great load that I think that thing just shoots lights out. And so, literally once I got back from California, I've just been going to the range every day and either verifying my load, or playing with certain things with regard to like powder charges to make sure, hey, my velocity is consistent, and just fine tuning things that I could, like with regard to like seeing if seating depth matters, and I get it. There's a lot of information out there, especially with when Hornady isn't pushing out with regard to like seating depth, but like the way that I think about it is like trust but verify, and based off of what I've seen with the results that I got, like I'm happy with the tweaking that I did, because I have some pretty good confidence going into this finale with my rifle load set up. And anyways, a lot of, so over the last 5 days, there's been a lot of back and forth to the range, a lot of rifle cleaning, a lot of brass prep. Gosh, I think I said this maybe in the last podcast, but with with the way that all of my like brass is set up right now, is like I essentially have like, with my 6.5 47, I have like 750 pieces, and I turned all those over for the gap grind, which is like now, if anything, the 6.5 47 was ready to go in terms of brass rep, but my 6.5 Creedmoor, when I had my good friend John over the summer, we shot a shit ton while he was here. We shot a shit ton while he was here with our 6.5 Creedmoors, because we shot the NRL Hunter Gunworks smash together. But I have like 1,200 pieces that I had to essentially turn over. So just a lot of, resizing, trimming, priming, cleaning. And so now, thankfully, all that has been turned over, but it was like, again, 1,200 pieces. So once I was able to find a load that and velocity that I knew that worked, I essentially just stuffed with a different lot of 153s that I had that same exact load for barrel number 3 to like break in. So like my break-in process for a barrel, and this is just me, is to just shoot it. A lot of people overthink this. It's a common question that I get is like, hey, how do you break your barrel in? Guys, I just shoot it, right? And what I did, and I've recorded this whole kind of this whole process kind of behind the scenes. So you'll see it maybe hopefully 2025. But as soon as I spun barrel number 3 on to my extra lone peak, I bore scoped it so you can see kind of what a brand new barrel looks like in terms of like when it's freshly cut. And what I did was just threw like 50 rounds of 147s together, a pet load that I have. And I mean, that thing shot great in terms of like my ESs too. Like my spreads for my first 5 shots, which was crazy, was like, I even posted a picture of it. Let me see. I posted a picture of it on my story. It was insane and almost unbelievable at the same time. But my like ES was under 10 feet per second, which was crazy. Out of barrel number 3. So I then took, let's say, 150 rounds of 153s and then like 50 rounds of 147s. And then I just used that rifle to practice with. Like troop lines is what I worked on. And then positionally, I worked on just like 2 positions, or 2 targets, 5 positions, near far type engagement to work on my recoil management and to work on, my ability to quickly dial between each target. Now, I will say I was really surprised. I shouldn't say that because I already knew the answer, but, there's a significant difference in recoil with just that 13 grains of bullet weight and sure powder charge. So like, again, coming from a 6.5 47 that I shot at the gap grind running 140 ELDMs, right at about 2720. And now I've got 153s running right about 2650, 2670. There's a significant difference in felt recoil between those 2 cartridges. And, I was just getting back into the saddle with that 6.5 Creedmoor in terms of, okay, hey, these are the pressures that I need to apply to get away with, my wobble zone and the amount of recoil that I'm able to manage to be able to see my shot. Because, again, I think there's a big difference between, seeing your shot, like seeing your splash, and then like finding the source of information or source of where that bullet's actually landing. And this is where like, the newer shooters or, the shooters that struggle to really see their impacts kind of struggle with, especially when it comes to like close targets and very small targets. Close up targets or close distance targets and small targets is the ability to really pinpoint the point of origin. And that was one of the things that I wanted to try to make sure that I was able to do is, figure out, okay, hey, I know I don't have an issue managing recoil because I'm able to see exactly where my shot is going, but I want to actually recover quick enough with regard to my dwell time so that I could see exactly where that bullet is going or even pick up my trace, even in positional shooting. So one thing that I wasn't really able to practice is like shooting off natural terrain because, with regard to like shooting off rocks or like shooting in field conditions, sometimes, things like based off of like how the rock formation is and whatnot and where the targets lay, sometimes you're not able to get a good natural point of aim because your body's kind of crooked. And so, what I love about shooting off rocks at the end of the day, it's like, because typically those things are solid, you're able to almost like load into it a lot more than you would like a traditional, like let's say PRS barricade, which is what I mainly practice on over the last 5 days positionally. So I'm just curious when I head out to Bliss, Idaho over this weekend in terms of just how I'm going to be able to handle just the differences with regard to my position building, right? Because again, with shooting off of rocks and natural terrain, really the biggest thing you have to be mindful of is your like magazine placement as well as your bag placement, right? Because I know that I've run into issues in the past with like previous rifle setups and magazines where, I was putting downward pressure or upward pressure from the bag or the rock to my magazine, which now caused feeding issues, which now like stresses you out because you're on the clock and now you're getting hung up on something very simple or small, and it just spirals out of control from there. So I'm hoping with the configuration that I have, which I talked about in the rifle video that I put out last month, of like, hey, I haven't had any magazine issues since moving over to the C4 setup and AW mags. So I hope that continues to be true for this weekend. But yeah, definitely when it comes to shooting from rocks or natural terrain, I feel like I know that I have a tendency to utilize a lot more forward pressure than rear pressure. Because again, I know that my body weight can, or the rock can take my body weight. So it's just being careful with, the amount of pressure that I'm applying, because this is one thing that I've talked about is like, there's really no way to recreate the same amount of forward pressure if you were like the guy that loads the hell out of your bipods in the prone. Sure, you might find consistency in that, right? But that's only the prone position. Once you get off your belly, there's no way to recreate that same amount of forward pressure in terms of your weight, unless again you're in rocks. But even with that, like if you're in the standing position, there's no way to forward load like whatever the weight of your upper body is. There's no way to recreate the whole length of your body, like from your toes to your rifle to shoulder connection. If that makes sense. But so these are just things I'm thinking about, and realistically, when it comes to like pressures, the weight of your rifle or your rifle configuration, matters, because sometimes there is no change with regard to your point A and point A impact shift when you have a heavier rifle like my 29.5 pounds competition rig. But for my hunters out there that are listening to this that are running like a 11-pound 300 Win Mag, there is a significant, I shouldn't say significant, but there is a noticeable point A and point A impact shift when you change the amount of pressure that you're applying to the buttstock. So anyways, some of the things that I was thinking about as I was practicing was, number one was, okay, hey, figure out my processes with regard to, building my position and making sure that, when I build my position, I'm taking my time, but also pushing myself so that when it comes to game time, that I know, 2 minutes or however long, I'm not sure how long each stage is gonna be. I can imagine it's roughly 2 minutes. But I know that I'm gonna have plenty of time when the time comes. And so there's kind of like a catch-22 per se. Whereas, I wanted to like go fast to like push my threshold, because that's the only way that, you would grow. But at the same token of like time management, right? And making sure that like internally I have a clock where it's like, okay, hey, I take my first shot at 10 seconds and I want to break my last shot to really maximize my time, to where if it's a 90-second stage, I want to really break my last shot at 89 seconds without feeling stressed. And, I usually been calling out the shooters that I think do this really well, which is like Nick Godarzi, Dave Preston, if you watch them shoot, it's like, they really, it's like they're almost moving in slow motion and they're not stressed at all. And they are very consistent. And so wanting to almost try to adopt that, because I used to be in the mindset of like, well, if I'm able to shoot the course of fire within 60 seconds, on a 90-second stage and still clean it, I'm technically the better shooter. Well, when I drop 1 point, get 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10, and they clean it at 80, at 89 seconds, it doesn't matter. Speed is fine, but accuracy final. Gene Howenstein, one of my Urban Sniper School instructors, said that when I was going through Urban Sniper. And if you're in the sniper community, you know the name Gene. He is a legend in our community and kind of changed the way that, again, I think modern snipers shoot in urban and especially the global war on terrorism. Anyways, complete sidetrack. So shout out to Gene, phenomenal instructor. I'm not sure if he listens to podcasts, but anyways, I think changing, getting back on track to like my training process and my thought process of, getting ready for the finale. I wanted to make sure that, all my processes were not rusty, right? Because it's like going to the gym, right? It's, for me at least, it's like, I can't expect to like take 3 months off, go back to the gym and like lift the same amount of weight that I did 3 months ago. It's just not possible. And I know that when I don't train for a while, that it's these little things that creep up on me on game day or on match day where, I forget to dial my dope, or, I forget the amount of pressures that I need to apply with my support hand, or what I can get away with regard to like my positions. And then I think what really takes a big hit though is my ability to call wind and correct back on target. But specifically my ability to call wind. That's what really deteriorates when I don't train for a while. And so that was one thing that was really nice about being able to train up to this match, was that because it's about fall time or obviously it's fall, and so we've been getting some heavier wind patterns in Cody, and thankfully every day that I've been out to the range, except the travel day when I confirmed my load one last time, or confirmed the load that I'm taking to this match, it was the only time when I was shooting at my furthest plate, which is 1145, that I held straight up at that target. Whereas like leading up to that travel day, every day that I went to the range, I had some type of wind, whether it's a mil, 1.5. I think the most that I held was like 2.5 mils one day. And then really, really been, playing with both with regard to wind in terms of like dialing for wind and holding for wind. So when it comes to holding or dialing, I'm in the camp of like a good rifleman or a good competitive shooter knows when to apply each technique based off of that specific situation. And so for me, I know that if the target's super small and winds are consistent, I'm going to dial every single time. This kind of goes into another layer of like, well, when we're shooting with precision through a magnified optic, are we staring at our reticle or are we staring at our target? And I actually put a poll up on my feed on the way out here because it came to my mind. And there's a lot of people that stare at the target, which I'm not saying is the wrong answer. I just want to give you guys some food for thought. Like, how could you be staring at the target, especially when you're calling for wind, when you have to overlay your reticle wind call over the target? At that point, when you're breaking your shot, are you staring at 1.5 mils on the target, or are you staring at the target with just 1.5 mils in your peripheral? Again, some food for thought. But for me personally, and I even verified this with a couple of top level shooters that are also instructors, to just make sure I'm not the only one thinking this. But I asked them like, hey, when shooting through a magnified precision optic and shooting with precision, what are you staring at? And most of them all came back with staring at the reticle. So yeah, again, some food for thought. Let me know what you guys stare at, and now if you're thinking about it, like, oh, I don't know what I stare at, but try it. See, and I know there's some like psychology behind, like, especially if our wobble zone is not great, right? If we're staring at the reticle, and especially if our wobble zone is like zigzagging back and forth, our knee-jerk reaction is to always like move in the opposite direction that our reticle to try to correct it. But I think it also it also goes to show in terms of, like, for me, when I'm looking at my reticle, like, based off of what I'm seeing, what I need to do with my body position to correct the way that the wobble zone looks, but also making sure that when I do find my natural point of aim, or do find my center float of the reticle in the middle of the target, that I'm at least waiting there for like 1 to 2 seconds before actually pressing the shot, versus like timing my shot of like, okay, hey, my reticle swinging off to the left, so I need to drive it to the right, and then boom, I'm going to send it. No, I don't do that. I realize, okay, the center of my float right now is on the left side of this target. I need to slightly shift my body, centimeters or millimeters, my natural point of aim, so that I can drive that rifle slightly to the right. So now the center of the float is in the center of my target. Now I'm just pressing a good shot, knowing if my wind call is good, if my trigger press is good, that bullet's going to go exactly where, the center of that reticle is floating. Again, that's just my kind of my process when I'm diagnosing or shooting positionally. One of the ditties that I had in the Marine Corps that I would teach my junior guys, and I still would teach it to this day, is breathe, reticle, squeeze. And breathing is to remember to just breathe naturally, right? I like to exaggerate my breathing cycle just so that I can see that up and down movement of the reticle, because that also tells me that I'm connected to the buttstock. I know that when sometimes, you get into the habit of shooting too much prone or relying on a rear bag, you relinquish your rifle to shoulder connection. So that deep breath allows you to make sure that, hey, I'm not over relying on my bag. I've still got a good rifle to shoulder connection, which is going to lead to better recovery and follow through, as well as recoil management, or better recoil management and recovery when you take your shot. And then focusing on the reticle, and then making sure that I'm applying good, consistent pressure with my trigger finger before, versus, tapping it. And granted, I think there's a lot of shooters out there that we see that are good, bad shooters. And what I mean by that, like, they slap the trigger all the time, but yet they still make impacts. It's like, hey, if that's how and if they do well, I mean, my hat's off to them. But fundamentally speaking, in terms of just like my shooters out there that are not competitive shooters, that, are driving guns that, don't have that wiggle room, or driving like a sniper rifle with a 5-pound trigger weight, like, there's no way to get around trying to slap a 5-pound trigger weight and still think you're going to be on target. That's just my 2 cents. So I know that when I get done competing next week or this weekend, and I go back to, like, say, a regular work rifle, like one of my 308s, there's going to be, a learning period, whether that's 1, 2, or 3 days of training, to where, like, I have to get used to recoil management, the pressures that I'm applying, my trigger press, all these things. So I'm looking forward to getting back to regular work rifles, or practical rifles, like my hunting rifle, just because, in my opinion, those are a lot more fun to shoot, just because I actually have to work for every impact, kind of like an NRL hunter. Not saying that you don't have to do that for PRS, But, I think I'm just speaking relatively to, non-competitive shooters that have just, rifles that they've either built that are functioned, or precision rifles that are made for more practicality for whatever they use it for as hunters or snipers. So anyways, wrong rabbit hole to go down. Kind of I'm gonna circle it back to my competition prep. Now, when it came to managing, you know, my loads and my like reloading process. Again, I didn't try to reinvent the wheel with regard to neck tension or anything like that. I just essentially played with the different powder charges, and what I did was kind of like a hybrid of kind of what Hornady has put out recently with their like big group shot testing, and essentially I did that because I mean it makes sense in terms of like, and as with a PRS rifle, I'm going to be shooting anywhere between 10 to 12 rounds. So when I shot my loads or my groups, I shot literally 10 rounds over a string of fire, and I try to shoot it within that 2-minute mark, because that's the firing rate that I'm going to be shooting at, versus like before I used to try to take all the time in the world to shoot those 10 shots to be as precise as possible can, which is fine. But I also wanted to see what my threshold was as a shooter when shooting within those 10 shots, right? Because when we're talking about the full precision rifle system, it's not just the rifle itself. It's like how the shooter is connected to the rifle and how you're pressing the shot. So you have to integrate your flaws into the accuracy of the whole rifle system. So making sure that I was shooting all 10 shots within 90 seconds, 120 seconds was important to me, just because I was able to now see at 100 yards, okay, hey, what is the precision rifle system, including me, capable of? And based off of what I was getting, I was roughly getting to right at about like that 0.5, 0.6 MOA group, which I was happy with. Sure, they're like, if I did the first 3 shots sometimes or 4 shots, I mean, they were in the same hole, and it would be like a less than a quarter-minute gun. But as you start to fire more, you'll start to see kind of that pattern. And what I was just looking for is making sure there was no like random flyers, and that my spreads were good. And so moving into the finale right now, I think the way that my load is set up, I'm running 153s again, right around that 2670, and my ESs were never more than 30 feet per second, which is in all single digit SDs, which I'm happy with. Now, one thing I will say that is important is, and I need to do a better job at doing this, or coming up with a better system. But because it's dry in Wyoming, as soon as you open, or at least for me, as soon as I open one of the lids to my powder containers, like it immediately has what I call a shelf life in terms of like consistency of like getting, those initial loads to where, after let's say 2 or 3 months, because, Wyoming's dry, essentially, if I try to use the same charge weight 2 or 3 months later, I notice a velocity increase because now the powder is a little bit drier. So I know there's a lot of guys out there that like have like, their reloading rooms and humidity controls and all that stuff. Like I don't do any of that. But I'm just mindful of like, and actually, as soon as I open a jug of powder, I will, annotate when I opened it. And so getting ready for the finale, I had like 3 or 4 jugs that were just like, essentially they've been opened a year ago. And I was using that to practice, but also confirm my loads. What I should have done earlier because I knew that I wasn't going to have enough to practice and then load for the finale. So what I should have done is I should have figured out the jug that I was going to use for, hey, I'm going to be using this jug because I have enough for it for the finale, for the 300 rounds that I loaded for it. So I need to make sure I'm confirming my charge with this, or my load with this, instead of using the practice ammo to do my load, or my practice powder to do my load development, because there was a change in my velocity when I went from my practice powder to my actual, hey, this is the finale powder that I'm going to use. And it was like maybe like 20 feet per second difference, but like in the grand scheme of things, when we're talking about shooting at distance, right? Shooting at 11, 12, 1300 yards, like those 2 or 3 tenths are going to make a difference. And, typically I don't stress about that stuff, especially like as an instructor, when I would tell students like, hey, like if you're missing off by 20 or 30 feet per second, you're not going to notice that in like 700, which you won't, right? But when we're talking about competing at a very high level, like those 20 to 30 feet per second matters, because we're talking about now in shooting in competition 2024. I mean, I don't know how big of a size target that the match directors are putting out for this match, but I know if I try to do, like that grind at K&M earlier this month, like it would have been a clean miss because we were shooting at 1 MOA targets. I would have been 2 tenths over every single time. So what I'm trying to say is, like, depending on your level of, capability, right? You won't see those 20 to 30 feet per second, especially if you're only shooting out to 500-600. But if you're shooting out to 1200, those 20 to 30 feet per second really matters, especially when you start shooting at small targets, and especially if you're shooting at a very high level event like this, where every shot counts. And because, at the finale, what's interesting about the finale is when you look at the scores after both days, like it's truly the top, like 150 shooters in the nation, because rarely have I ever seen like the winner ever run away with the match. Unlike, sometimes like you'd go to a match. Like I remember there was a nut crusher match that I took second or third at a couple years ago, and Morgan King ran away with it by like 13 points ahead of me, and I was at second. But you don't see that at the finale, right? Most of the guys we're all within a few shots of each other, and especially that mid pack, or like that top 20 that are consistently at matches, and sometimes top 10. So like the 20, the 30th, or even 40th place, like we're all within like 1 or 2 shots, and it's like a tiebreaker that splits us all up. And so my thinking is like, okay, well, I want to make sure that I have my feet per second down to that, 1 foot per second, so that my ballistic solver is as accurate as I can be, so that I'm not giving up those deep shots. Anyways, all that to say is, make sure you check your powder, have a system, especially if you are committing a lot of time and energy to an event like this, to a competition, if it's your first competition, right? Because, you think about all the resources that go into prepping for a match, right? Especially if you're taking time away from your family, if you're traveling to a match, if you're taking time off of work, right? And I know jugs of powder are super expensive today. Buying the same lot of bullets, everything adds up. It gets expensive. So investing into a better system in terms of, like how I'm going to track my powder, how I'm going to track, the, lots that I'm using, how frequent, is something that I want to get better at for the future, so that I'm not scrambling like I was for this. So, anyways, this podcast is right at about that 35-minute 40 mark. I have to go ahead and start packing the truck to get ready to head to check-in day. And actually, just the full transparency, huge shout out to PRS for allowing me to video this event. I've been talking to Ken, and we've been talking about content ideas. And so he's given me, essentially, him and I are working together to curate some content for the Precision Rifle Series sport, whether it's behind the scenes or talking to shooters at the actual match. And actually, my best friend Brian is coming out to film it. And yeah, also a huge shout out to the Kinetic Research Group team. Full transparency, they pretty much covered all my expenses for this trip. So they came on as a huge, really big sponsor. I mean, obviously I'm a sponsor by KRG, but I'm going to plug this anyways. But yeah, I reached out to them, and they were able to cover pretty much all my expenses for this match. So huge shout out to those guys for, number one, all the support for the last 8 years that I've been shooting the rifles, but really stepping up to help me with this event. Because again, this is probably going to be the last finale that I shoot for a while, especially with baby boy on the way. And someone had just messaged me and wished me good luck. Actually, my really good friend Michael, and he said, "Good luck at the finale. No pressure, but this is the last one you will shoot before becoming a boy dad," which was awesome. So thanks, Michael, for that. But anyways, hopefully you guys like this. I'm going to try to get this out the door as soon as I launch it while I'm packing. No funny edits or anything like that. Just quick, down and dirty. Sorry for missing last week. And after this, I mean, I'm pretty much going to be grinding at the house, working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes with regard to what's coming for 2025. I'm excited. I'm excited to finally unveil some of the things that I've got going on. But I appreciate everyone that, again, is tuning into the podcast, watching the YouTube videos. And if you haven't seen, I dropped one earlier this week about analyzing my videos and what I look for. I actually, talk about how I manage data with a troop line in that Whiteboard Wednesday. So go ahead, take a look at that. And then I've got a few more Whiteboard Wednesdays already in the pipe from my practice footage in preparation for the finale. So I've been vlogging this whole trip, to give you guys kind of just more behind the scenes of like what goes into in a series like this or an event like this, so that you guys have a general idea of what my processes are, between, travel, booking, and an Airbnb, and stuff like that. So thankfully I was able to bring my whole family out because my sister lives right down the street, which is crazy. But the downside is it's an hour and a half commute every single time to the range. So I got to start beating feet over there. Like I said, appreciate you guys being here. If you're new to the page, welcome. Hopefully you enjoy me rambling about whatever. But yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. For everyone that's shooting a finale and you're listening to this, good luck. If you see me, come say hi. And I look forward to meeting all you guys out there. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Until then, remember, you have control.